furthest. So I'll start with Frank Peasley. And Frank drove 136 miles to be here. He's from Douglas, Wyoming, a Cheyenne, Wyoming native. And he has practiced in Douglas for 41 years. He is also a member of the Wyoming legislature, House District 3, serving Commerce and Platte counties. He's married to Nancy. They have 4 children and 16 grandchildren. And past experiences include serving as a Douglas municipal judge, as Commerce County attorney, as city attorney for both Glenrock and for Rolling Hills. And he also served on the State Board of Law Examiners and the Wyoming Judicial Nominating Committee. Next we have Joe Blumel. And Joe drove 233 miles to be here from Kemmerer, Wyoming. He was born in Rock Springs. He's a Wyoming native. I forgot to say the graduation year. Frank Peasley graduated in 1970. Joe Blumel graduated from here in 1986. He started out as a deputy county attorney in Kemmerer and then went on to open his own solo practice where he's been since 1994. He's married to Ann. He's also the past president of the Wyoming State Bar and the current Wyoming State Delegate to the ABA House of Delegates. He also serves on the Wyoming State Board of Professional Responsibility and is on the ABA Standing Committee on Professional Discipline. And then we have Tim Hiegler. He's our recent graduated in 2010. He was born in Otto, Wyoming. He practices in Graybull. He came 373 miles to be here, so really thank you for making that drive. He's the founding partner of Holman, Eagler, and Hunt in Graybull and practices law throughout the Bighorn Basin. He's married to Mandy, and they have 2 children and make their home and base in Wyoming. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
I guess I'll go right up here. Before the clock starts, I'd like to acknowledge some of the members of the bar are here for their CLE, and I want you to note their method of dress. Therefore, I guess I didn't have to dress down today to impress you with the fact that in the rural law practice, you can kick back just a little bit. All right, I'm Frank Peasley. I practiced in Douglas, Wyoming since 1970. I stumbled through here in 4 years, 2 of which were on probation. I was trying to work my way through college. Back in those days, you could do it. You could work your way through. I don't know why college costs have gone up so much faster than the ability to earn, but I guess it's impossible now. I do remember during my second junior year in law school, Dean Trelease, you'll notice you'll have a dinner honoring him in a few days, I guess. The Dean Trelease asked me to stop parking my janitor's van out in front of the law school. He said it took away from the dignity of a law school. And I don't understand that. It was an old Volkswagen with mops hanging out, broken windows and stuff like that. But that's how I got through law school. When I got out, I was in the top half of my class, number 17 out of 35. If you figure that, I just eked into that top half. And that was only because the senior year, everybody got lazy and I managed to surge ahead. When I went into practice, I didn't have any idea I was going to go into a small rural law practice, except no one else would have me. And I know my wife went kicking and screaming, but you know, she'd been pregnant all the way through law school, so she didn't have much choice. She was pregnant when we left. And shortly after we got there, she gave birth to my 4th child, who is now practicing law with me. I wonder statistically, and one of the problems I had going to law school, I came in too much as a philosopher, I think. I came out of poli-sci, found out you couldn't get a job as a bachelor degree poli-sci graduate, and just went into law school only because my LSAT was high. Then my grades, of course, didn't reflect that. And at all times, it was a struggle. Those of you getting ready to take the bar exam this next year, read my article in the August version of the Wyoming Lawyer. There's some good stuff in there on, well, my article I wouldn't read, but I did write about my experiences on the Board of Bar Examiners, and it was more of a, well, it was truthful, but more humorous than informative. There's another article in there about that. There's also one on the character and fitness. Mine would be read more for recreation. I suppose you'd keep it in your bathroom as you read it. My code in law school as I went through was simply that in my view, I was struggling, I wasn't getting everything, but I kept thinking, You know, if the aim of law is to enforce justice, and if justice makes sense to all of us, then I can figure it out when I get out. All I got to do is get that damn degree and get through that bar exam. And that's what I did. And then when I got out, the only place I could go was a gentleman in Douglas, Wyoming, a guy named Joe Sullivan, father of Mike Sullivan, our former governor. Joe had a women's bathroom he wasn't using, and I was able to use that as long as they left the stool in there. So the first 3 years I had to share my office with women who occasionally had to use that. That was the beginning of a rural law practice, and none of you are going to go through that. I also spent the first summer there without a refrigerator, 3 little kids, a pregnant wife, and I spent my nights stealing ice from motels to put in our cooler to get through the summer. It was a tough go, and I'm not telling you got to do that. I'm just telling you that that's how a lot of us ended up in small town practices. Statistically, I guess I don't know how many are going to graduate, but I understand that, let's just say 60 of you graduate. I understand about 75% will pass the bar. 60% of those will practice law here, 65 of which will practice in a law firm, and about 10% of those will practice in a small law firm. So I figure if there were 60 of you here that were seniors, I'd be talking to 2 of you. It doesn't seem like they want to come to small practices, and I recognize that as a level of insecurity. First of all, you got to go in, you got to be a scrapper, and you got to fit into a small town. I think if and again, this really isn't set up for a 10-minute lecture or talk, but let me just give you my view of it. The problem with a small town is there's no place to hide. When you first go there, you might as well walk around naked for a couple of days, because everybody's going to know everything about you sooner or later. Right, Miss Case? You understand that, and that's what you got to do. And small towns are no places for bottom-feeding thugs, or for ladder-climbing pinheads, or for thin-skinned meatheads, I guess. You can't go in there thinking that there's necessarily a ladder built for you, or that there's a way that you can slide around the rules, or that there's some guarantee that anything is going to happen. It's a commitment of a lifestyle more than it is a profession or even a life's mission. For instance, if your mission is to go out and save the world, the problem with going to a small town is you're going to hit the reality of that, because you'll have to do it one client at a time, instead of going to work for a high salary and then going out and saving the world. You'll have to do it with individual clients that come to you that need your help. And they're going to come in and they're not going to have the money to pay, and you're going to have to say, well, I don't give away my services for free, but. And I'll tell you what, when I make deposits each month, even to this day, the first 15 entries on that thing are $20 and $25 checks from clients that have paid us over a lot of years. So in any event, it's a lifestyle. So let me just go quickly through I did write some of these down. I said if you're going to go into a small town practice, make sure you fit with wherever you go. You got to get a community that's going to work for you. If you've got a spouse, it's got to work for her or him, okay? You got to make sure it's the kind of place that has potential. And don't go into a town that only has you as a lawyer. You're starved to death, right, Joe? He'll tell you about that. You got to have competition, otherwise nothing happens. Meet, greet, join, but don't hustle. In other words, get in, meet the people, but don't look like you're a hungry guy passing out your card. And we had an attorney in Douglas once. I was talking to him, and the noon hour whistle went off. And he jumped in his little beat-up car and took off. And I walked out of the courthouse. You can drive it up a minute later. And he said, God, I thought that was a fire whistle. And you know, that sort of a mentality of an ambulance chaser, aggressive, I'll get you out of this, a hustler, just doesn't work as well in a small community. It might work within sub-communities of a larger town. Get into your churches, your service clubs, your coffee clubs. Get your wife or husband involved in those things too. I know my son had a chance to go to work for a large Tulsa law firm. Had he gone there, he'd drawn a good salary all these years, had that health insurance plan, he'd making good money. Instead, he came to a small town. His wife came kicking and screaming because her family was from Tulsa. But 3 years, I said, just give us 3 years, Laura. And you know, she couldn't drag her out of that town now. And she loves it. She got involved. She stayed with it. And she loved it. She grew into the town, and now the town wouldn't let her go. I'm sure of that. You got to try to avoid being too showy. I still drive my clunking pickup, but then that's not avoid being showy. That's just what's left I've got, you know. You got to remember that your reputation's critical. And it isn't something that you can compromise. There's no place to go when you screw it up in a small town. I remember that, and don't forget, even when you sue people, I can't tell you how many times I've had to get in litigation with people, but I still talk to them at the grocery store. I still go to the same churches they go to. I still get involved with them. I sued a guy there must have been 5 or 6 times, and he was getting a little tired of it. But on the other hand, I'd see him in the grocery store, and I'd say, "Hi, Jake, how are you doing? How are the grandkids?" We talk about grandkids. So it's not like you can't live in that community, and it's important that you get over that bridge. You got to encourage your spouse to be an ambassador, but be careful that sometimes gives you the bad rep, especially like if they like to talk too much. They're going to think she's out or he's out talking about what's going on at the office. Okay, be the person you want to live to, volunteer as much as you can, give to local causes, attend local celebrations, learn to understand the people. You don't have to be like the people you are, that you're living with. If I was, I'd have worn my cowboy hat today, right? But I don't. But I sure as hell understand the economy. I understand ag. I understand the oil field. I understand the types of people that are going to be coming in. And I understand how they feel. And you don't judge them. You just understand them. Because they're just people in a small town. Remember, when you go in, you're a generalist, you're vulnerable to the specialist. You'll get hammered by them all the time, but you'll always get a second shot at them. Get to know your judge, your reporter, your clerk. Get to know the courthouse. And most importantly, establish a high level of trust. Because nothing inhibits a small town practice than a judge is constantly putting you on the grill and asking you about a case. You want to expect by the time you're my age and you're taking probate orders to the judge, all you're going to talk about is how the Yankees are doing. And he's going to sign your order. That's what you expect at this level of life. And you expect your draft of orders. If it's yours, the judge will say, "Is that yours, Frank?" "Yep, fine, okay. I know you did it right." Others, you can see it for years. They're struggling. The judge kicks something back. He fussed them. In a small town, you're probably only going to get to know one judge real well. Somebody whistle when I've got a minute left. You're going to be a generalist, get to know everybody. Learn patience. Like I said, indecision is the key to flexibility. Think about that. You're going to have a lot of times when somebody comes in on that urgent, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. That's something you've got to watch out for in a small practice. They're going to drain grandma in, and they're going to say, "Grandma wants to change her will and leave everything to me." Or they're going to come running in and say, "I just caught Charlie, he was over at Susie's house, I want a divorce." There is a need sometimes, and I don't know whether this is true in large practice because I can't compare and contrast, but you got to sometimes just set them down and say, "Well, come on in tomorrow, I'll talk to your grandma about that change in the will. I need to talk to her alone." You give it a little time. On the divorce, you got to put a little time and space. Everybody's got an urgent situation. KISS, keep you organized, keep your system simple, especially if you're going to start on your own like I did. I mean, I was in another office, but I had to build my own system, and I thought I was going to get really fancy. I read all the books on this. Just keep it so you understand it. Keep it so it can expand. It's not bad to have everything alphabetical. That works. I started coding everything with numbers and having cross-references, and now I can't find friggin' 40-year-old file. So that was a mistake I made. I'm in my 2,160th week of work, and the only reason I know that is because that first week I walked in, that sheet of paper I wrote 1, and then I wrote poems, talked to Joe, moved the desk, I kept track. And I have got 2,160 sheets of paper with my bill. Now I do it a little more formally. I got my billing time and stuff on that. That's the only thing I started off right that I'm still doing. I guess finally, just some things to remember as you move along. I got 1,000 other things. I learn from others. Each community has its own unwritten traditions. Steal ideas from others and forums. Watch for good forums. Build your own. Take the nasty stuff, get into the divorces. You got to do a divorce. You won't practice law if you don't do a bad divorce. You will not be a true attorney. And any attorney that tells me he's an attorney, I say, "What was your toughest divorce?" "Well, I didn't do that." Get out of my class. That is important. You got to know what, that's where all the feelings bubble up. That's where you get to see humans. And you would be just like him probably if you had to switch shoes. We're unlike larger communities. Like I said, there's no way to hide, no place to hide. You got to find ways in your office to get the stress off, how to kick back. You ought to see my son. He learned it well. You go down to his office at March Madness. There's adult beverages in his office. He's got a baseball cap on backwards. It looks like a bookie joint. Got about 6 TVs going. And March Madness is just clients of learn. You're going to go in and see Scott. You're going to get Scott on March Madness time. So for 2 weeks we do that. And that you can do that in a small town. And people understand. And they like it actually. And take time out to take your clients playing golf or whatever you have to do. Okay, like I said, conflicts of interest are just, I can't even get started on them now. I lived in a pre-Birmingham world back in the days before we had to read all the writings of John Vernon, and it was just do as you would have done unto you. And it worked pretty good. And generally that's a good rule, but there's conflicts of interest. You can't avoid them in small towns. And I got about 5 hats out there. Sometimes I'm wearing one, sometimes I'm wearing another. I got to believe I'm going too far. I was going to make some comments about don't be thin-skinned. Back in Gerald Mason was the president of Wyoming Bar. We started this, proud to be a Wyoming lawyer. I know that's important, but I'm going to tell you, do not be thin-skinned. Learn every good lawyer joke you got. And then when they tell you one, you fire back. That's like me being offended at ball jokes. Or old man jokes now. No, we are a profession that invites that. For crying out loud, we've destroyed families and emptied play yards of kids. We have more commercials than erectile dysfunction now on TV. We're promoting all these things, and like I said, and even when you are on a noble cause, the highest of causes, and doing what's good for lawyers, there's going to be a lawyer on the other side. So as a profession, we just come out 50-50. And I remember this because of a client once that sent me a quotation, a t-shirt that said Isaiah 11:46. That's all it said. So it sent me to my King Matthew, my King James version of the Bible, and son of a gun, woe be unto the lawyer. So it's been around a long time. It's been around a long time. Live with it. It's okay. Change it on an individual level, because people are always going to have a problem with lawyers. Live with it. It isn't going to kill you. And if that's all it takes to knock you down, then shame on you. You got a weakness. Okay, I'm sorry. I probably ran over. Thank you.
Well, you all can already tell that I'm not a very good attorney. I don't have a pen and I don't have my legal pad. I apologize. My kids kept me pretty busy this morning. My wife and I actually came from Idaho Falls visiting with her family, so it was more like 500 miles. With one of my son's 3 and I have a 7-month-old daughter, so it was a very long trip. But I'm really happy to be here. It wasn't but a little over a year ago that I was in your guys' shoes, at least with the third-year law students. And it's a very, it's a daunting thing to get out of law school and to start actually being an attorney. I had friends that had told me that when they graduated from law school, they wanted to go start their own business. I laughed at them and told them how stupid they were, and that was just a very foolish thing to do. And the one thing I always pointed out is, you don't know how to do anything. Okay? It's like, we learn the law in law school, we learn the case law and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes down to, I had someone come into my office and want to get a divorce, I'm like, great. I didn't even know the first place to start. Someone's like, well, you got to do a complaint. I'm like, oh, okay. Do a complaint? Okay, what does that say? Does it really have to start with comes now? So that's a very daunting thing. So I always made fun of them. So I interned with the county attorney's office in Bighorn County. I grew up in Ottawa, Wyoming, so I always had a desire to move back to the area. So I grew up in rural Wyoming, and I've always wanted to live there. So that really wasn't too much of an issue for me. I was sure that I was going to be able to slip in and be the county attorney's new deputy attorney when I graduated. She offered me the position. Everything was great, except we had the elections and she lost. So I went from having a job to not having a job. Luckily, I passed the bar exam, and then I was living with my in-laws. I do not recommend that. Okay. My wife and I are still getting over that. Lived with them, and I just started firing applications wherever a job came open in Wyoming. I traveled to Gillette and interviewed. I traveled to Green River and interviewed. I traveled to Jackson to meet with a judge from Casper and interviewed for a clerkship. I was willing to do anything. I sent mass emails to every attorney in the Bighorn Basin saying, I will come in and take out your trash. I just want to get my foot in the door and have an opportunity. I will type the legal documents. I'll work as your legal assistant. You can pay me $7 an hour. But with the state of the economy, nothing was available. And I didn't get a single response from anybody. All the jobs I interviewed, I always came in as, you were our second choice. Thanks. So I maintained a pretty good relationship with this former county attorney. Her name is Georgia. And she's like, well, my husband works here, and we're raising our kids here, and I'm not moving anywhere, so I'm going to open up shop. And I was like, oh, you're crazy. You're nuts. It's like, that's the stupidest thing you could ever do. And she's like, well, you're welcome to come in with me if you want. So anyway, I kept looking and looking and looking, and nothing turned up. So we went over for Thanksgiving to visit my family, and I was like, well, I have no more money. I'm tired of living with my in-laws. So I guess. So we took the last of our money, filled up the car with gas, drove over, and found an apartment, put in our first month's rent deposit, and there we went. Opened up shop on January 3rd. And it was difficult. And that's something, I don't want to discourage any of you, because at this point I love what I do. But it's been, 7 months or 8 months or how long it's been. So it was a difficult thing. The attorney I'm with, she has some experience, mostly in the criminal area. And so she's got that kind of down pat. But I had a client come in and says, I want to do a will, and I want to leave everything to my kids. And I was like, great. How do I write that on a piece of paper? Lawyers use all this kind of fancy wording. What does per sturbies mean? So, and if this is an area that you guys ultimately decide to do as far as opening your own business, you're going to have a freak out moment. I'll tell you right now, forming an LLC is one of the easiest things in the world to do. All the forms are on the Secretary of State's website. It's a matter of tab, fill in the blanks, print it off, send it in with the $50. It's a really easy thing to do. I had a client come in, wanted to form an LLC. I said, great, I'll do that for you. He went home, I went home, cried, came back to the office like at 4:30 in the morning, cried. Tears just running down my face. I don't know what to do. Sitting at my desk, searching Google. It's not always the best place to go. How do I do this? My problem was I didn't know any other attorneys that dealt with that. I had no idea where to even begin. And I knew the guy was coming back later that day. And he looks at me, you're an attorney, you're just a step below God. You know almost everything. I didn't know how to do it. So finally, I got on my bar directory. They give you a nice little book with the bar directory. I found some people that deal in business laws. I sent an email. I felt so embarrassed. I was like, I'm emailing this guy or this gal, and they're busy doing their own thing. They don't have time to help me. And to my wonderful surprise, emailed me back. If you need anything, just give me a call. I called. We talked about it. I realized how simple it was, what a fool I was, crying all night. And it was a very easy thing to do. And sent me forms, helped me kind of work my way through it. And I was like, so that I think is really the key. Is you have to understand that when you get out, you're not going to know how to do anything. And I'm sorry to put it that way, and I'm sorry to say that. And maybe some of you will. You're probably a lot brighter than I was. I didn't know how to do anything. Okay. I knew how to do case law research, but I don't really do any appellate work, so that never really comes very often. Didn't know how to do anything, so you really have to start reaching out. And see, when I was back in law school, I had my job, so I didn't worry too much about networking. I was like, I go to that stuff and network and meet people. I've got a job. Well, that job ended up getting sucked out of my feet, and then I wished I had a network. So that's something I'd really encourage you to do, is every opportunity you get to network with an attorney, network. Build that base of people that you can go to and ask those questions. Somebody that's been doing it a little bit longer than and keep in contact with each other. You know, I had a lot of classmates that went and worked for larger firms. That's one of the benefits of going to work for a larger firm. No matter what comes through that door, somebody in that office has dealt with it before. And so they have somebody they can go to. So oftentimes I will email one of my friends that was able to get into one of those bigger firms, and I can, kind of punch them for some information. The other piece of advice I would give you is plagiarize. Plagiarism will become your best friend. Okay? An attorney I work with a lot, he says it best, don't reinvent the wheel. There's no need to. Okay? This last week, I'm handling my first probate. Thank you very much. Person died without a will. One of my old high school teachers. And I'm handling probate. I'm like, great. I don't even know where to begin. So I go to the courthouse. I talk to the clerks. I'm whining. I'm saying, do you know how to do a probate? Have you talked to an attorney? Do you know anybody I can talk to? They're like, well, Mr. Eagler, we've got these files over here, and they're colored green, and it's all the probate files. They're like, there's a really good attorney in the area. This is his name. He does really good work. Here's his file. So I get it. I'm writing down all these notes, and they're like, you can check out the file for, a week. Why don't you take it back to your office and make photocopies? Boom. I got all my forms. And it's from an attorney that is well respected in the area and knows what he's doing. And so I may not understand what all of them are for, or which ones I need. I'm still working through that. I'm actually communicating with him, saying, "Hey, I've got your form. What does this mean?" But I've got the backbone now. I've got the forms. And so now, as I'm working through it, and that's the nice thing. Once you work through something once, you kind of remember how to do it the next time. Of course, different issues come up, but at least you have a starting point. So I'm a big fan of plagiarism. So I love it now. It was illegal in school, but now it's great. And and I think that kind of answers the first point I brought up. Why does every legal document start with comes now? Well, to break it all to you, that's all attorneys do is plagiarize. And we've been plagiarizing since the 1400s, and nobody's had the guts to just say the plaintiff states, because that document back in the 1400s says comes now, and we're still using it. So definitely, I'm sorry. Saying, get to know your courthouse, get to know your clerks, stay on their good side, don't file stuff 5 minutes before 5. And they can really point you in the right direction. And you can get a hold of a lot of the forms and kind of give you a place to start with. It's definitely really important that if you're married, that you have to understand that your spouse is going to be a part of your firm, of your work life, whatever you want to call it. And for my wife, it was she came from southeast Idaho, in Idaho Falls, which is a bigger city for over there, and it was difficult for her. But she's starting to make that transition, and she's getting to where she really likes it as well. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, I guess, probably aside from not knowing what you're doing, the other big difficulty is getting paid. And it's an unfortunate reality that anybody in business faces. And in a small area, sometimes you got to make compromises in that sense. Where I'll talk to somebody and be like, "Well, this is what it's going to cost," and they're like, "Well, I can pay $25 a month," and I look at it and I see if that's something I can do. And if it's something that I can do, then that's what I do. On the other hand, I have other clients that come in that can't pay. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do this for you, and I think based on my experience, it's going to be around $1,500, $2,000 to do that, and I need that up front. And sure enough, they come in the next day, and there you go. Judge always tells me, money on the mahogany, money on the mahogany. And it's important because then the client knows that they have an attorney, and you know that you have a client. And so, but in a small area, you got to be flexible like that. Otherwise, you lose a lot of business. As indicated, do divorces. I mean, I'm in a city of 1,500 people, and there's 5 attorneys. So, but I am so busy now, I come into the office and I'm just stressed out all the time because I can never seem to get caught up. And one of the reasons is because I'm kind of the new kid on the block, and all these other attorneys are older and more experienced, and they're more specialized, and they're tired of dealing with divorces and child custody and all that kind of stuff. And so there was a big need for that, and I fit right in. And I actually enjoy it. I don't let it affect my relationship with my wife. You know, I'm like, you guys are crazy and you're nuts, but that's what you want. Okay, I'll try to do my best. But I go home and kiss my wife and I say, I'm so thankful to be married to you. There's a big need for that. One of the other big places to get business is through the county itself. And the nice thing about the county is the county always pays. The county always pays on time. And I get appointed to a lot of juvenile cases. And that's another area of the law that a lot of more experienced attorneys are just tired of dealing with, because some of the cases kind of get a little icky in that sense. Whenever they call, and if it's something I feel like I can do, I accept it. And it's good because it's good work. It's a lot of work. As I said, they pay. And it gets you a lot of good courtroom experience. And that's really one of the big benefits of practicing in a rural area or even going to business for yourself, is you are thrust into the courtroom from day one. Okay, I have a lot of friends that went to big firms. They have a steady paycheck. They always have somebody to go to for questions, but they have never seen the inside of a courtroom. And even those that have had are not allowed to talk. Because the reality, they work for a big firm. The big firm has big clients that pay a lot of money. They don't want some newbie that just got out of law school being up arguing in front of the judge or the jury. Okay. I have no choice. I got to get up there. And I've gotten up there and I've said, like, Judge, I'm objecting to something. I don't know what it's called. Please have patience with me. I know the other attorney knows what I'm trying to do. And the judge will usually say, well, it's probably this. Yes, that's my objection. So it's difficult, it's embarrassing, but you hit the ground running. And speaking to other attorneys, they've told me, they're like, you're better off for it, because 5-10 years down the road, you will know more or less what you're doing in that area, whereas a lot of your compadres that went to larger firms, even at that point, they will not have seen the inside of the courtroom. So, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is probably something you're more interested in, the bar exam. Okay, I wanted to tell you that I wasn't top 10% of the class. I wasn't anywhere near that. I was middle of the road. I did well. I did what I set out to do in law school. I had a young family, and that was a priority to me. And I wasn't one of the students that spent 12 hours a day up here. I had a young kid at home, and I said, I'm going to spend my time up here. When I'm in school, I'm going to be at school, and when I'm at home, I'm going to be at home. But I developed that balance. I remember when I started law school, they told us over and over again the type of law student you are is the type of attorney you're going to be. And I guess I took that from the sense of, well, if I turn in crappy work and I'm lazy and I try and cut corners, that's the sense that I looked at it. But the longer law school went on, I started to see it in a more broader sense. That if you don't have balance in your life while you're a law student, you're not going to have balance in your life when you're an attorney. Because I hate to break it to you, it doesn't get any easier after school. In fact, it gets more difficult. It's kind of like that. Well, I'll spend more time with my family after I pass the bar exam. Oh, but wait, now I'm in a new business and I got to get up. Well, 5 years down the road when things are going good, then I'll spend more time with my family, or I'll exercise or eat better, or that kind of stuff. Well, eventually you're going to be retired, and your wife will have left you, or her husband will have left you 40 years before, and your kids won't want anything to do with you, and then you'll have all the time in the world, but no one needs to spend it with. My philosophy was always like, when I'm here, I'm here. And I found that in my 3 to 4 hours, I was accomplishing more than a lot of my classmates were in their 12 or 14 hours spending here, because one day as I was outlining, I was looking at a classmate, he was updating his Facebook status and downloading music and that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, well, that's why you're up here 12 hours a day. And so I really developed that sense of balance as a student. And it's really been nice that it's carried over into private practice. And that's one of the things I really like too, is I'm not handcuffed to my job. If I get up in the morning and my son's having a fussy morning and really wants me to sit down and watch Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, I have the flexibility to do that. And I love that. And that, I guess that kind of brought me full circle. That I love what I'm doing. I love the flexibility of it. Financially, it's been very difficult, but we're getting to the point now where things are really starting to turn around. And I love it. I just love it. So with respect to the bar exam, don't kill yourselves over that. It really comes back to the balance thing. When you're studying for it, start early. I'm not going to put a plug for any particular thing. I happened to use Barbary because I was on a limited budget and I needed something that did both the essay and the multi-state. So that's what I went with. I followed their calendar. I started on day one. I studied for my 3-4 hours, whatever it was, and I just stuck with it that whole 2-month period until I took the bar exam. The bar exam is a very taxing exam. It's more of a, I don't know, do any of you have Delaney's class? You have Delaney's courses? If you've taken a Delaney exam, then that's the bar exam. It's like you start and then you're done and you're like, holy crap, what just happened to the last 3 hours? You know? It's just moving from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. But if you're trying to learn everything at the last minute, if you're trying to cram, you will fail. Because you're just going to burn yourself out. If you're spending 16 hours a day studying for the bar exam a week before, you're just going to burn yourself out and not retain. Start early and just put in the time. Just put in the time. And you get to it, you take it, and you pass it, and wonderful grade, and what was that all about? And you move on to the next thing in life. So, but it's not as bad as everybody makes it out to be. So, anyway, I don't know if are we going to do question and answer after. So, anyway, thank you.
Well, I'll start by kind of following up on a couple of the things that both Tim and Frank talked about. Tim, I guess it's too bad you didn't call me when you were looking for a job because, you know, they kind of joked about it. For a while, I was the only private lawyer in Cameron, and contrary to what Frank said, I survived fairly well. A lot of other people come to Cameron because they have to. You know, if that's where the case is and that's where the litigation is, that's where they come. A couple of little items to talk about, or that I want to try to talk about. You know, I'll begin by saying that it's really nice to see the diversity between us panelists. I mean, you know, Frank coming in his jeans. We've got Tim wearing his suit. I guess I'm kind of the mid category here. And you know, I'm going to give you a little, I'll tell you a story that I had when I was first practicing. I actually had a clerk. I was a prosecutor. Wyatt Skaggs would come into town and try to kick me around and beat me up. But one of the clerks came back. They had some private work done. They came in. They were literally mad. They came in and they said, "I'm so irritated. My lawyer is a great lawyer, but you know, it pisses me off when I go to see my lawyer and they're dressed the way they are. If I'm paying them what I'm paying them, I think they should at least dress nicely." Now, I'm going to talk about Frank, because Frank says, hey, you can kind of dress down, you can do it in your time. That's right. Frank can. How many years has Frank been practicing? You got it, baby. You got it. When you've been practicing as long as Frank has, you have a practice, you have a reputation, you built your character up like Frank has, you're right. He doesn't have to put on a tie to meet with his clients. He doesn't even have to wear a jacket. If he'd probably go in a t-shirt, and they're still happy to pay him because they know what they're getting. Now let's talk about Tim. Tim has something he's selling. Tim has told you, he's been very blunt about telling you. He cried when he was like, oh man, how am I going to put this together? Frank may not cry anymore, but there are times when he sits there and goes, oh God, what am I doing in this case? I do that, and I've been practicing for 25 years. Tim has an image. Tim's built that image, he's working on that image, he started with it, and he's come in here today with that same image, okay? And I'm going to tell you that those are all things you need to consider when you think about living in a small town and practicing in a small town. Now, another item that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try to pull these together, but how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, I hate it when people do that, you know, raise your hand if you, but in your mind, how many of you grew up in a small town? When I'm talking about growing up in a small town, I'm talking about you who say, wow, Laramie's a big city. This is great. Because if you grew up in that, then you already understand this. The rest of you who didn't raise your hand mentally and didn't go, yeah, that's me, listen up, because this is really for you. When Frank said there's no place to hide, he's not kidding. If you go to live in a small town, it depends how you look. They know what time you go to the office. They know what time you go home. They know that he's been in his office, Tim's been in his office until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. They know he gets there at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, yeah. Frank just said they don't know he's crying. That's right. You got it. And I'm going to tell you that that is a big deal. And if you don't want to live that life, don't go to a small town. If you like it, if you think, hey, that's okay, there are some benefits in it, it's going to be great. Some of the best fees I've ever had were people who bake for me, people who provided canned goods for me. Those were cases that somebody's come in and I'm going, there's no way you have the money to pay me what I'm going to need. I'm not willing to do the business that Frank has where it's like, okay, 25 bucks a month for the rest of your life. I just say, fine. I've been very blessed, I've been very lucky in that my business plan when I set it up, I just basically said, fine, I'll take your case. Well, how much am I going to have to pay you? Don't worry about it. And I checked that up for that little pro bono time that I do. And some of those fees that I've gotten have come back multiple times for the pro bono fee that I did to do it. Now, I'm supposed to be talking about ethics. One of the things that I'm going to tell you that these two gentlemen haven't really talked about, but I think this is an ethical thing. And maybe they talk about it in your class on rules of professional conduct, maybe they don't, professional responsibility. But I'll tell you that one of the things that is a critical factor when you're in a small town and you're doing case selection is you need to sit down and say, can that client actually pay my fees? Is this case worth what it is that I'm going to have to spend and put into it? Because if it's not, you need to tell your client, sorry, you got a bad case. Now, I'm an anomaly. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of lawyers that I know that will not tell a prospective client, you got a bad case. I realize, I'm walking on thin ice. You can look at the rules of professional conduct. I'll tell them, I think you have a bad case. There are other lawyers out there. They may differ. There are other lawyers that are better than I am. And they may be able to make something out of this case. But I'm going to tell you, I don't think I can. And I'm not willing to take your case. By the way, you've got some real time limitations. You better go talk to other lawyers if you don't like what I'm telling you. And you better do it now. And then I do a nice little letter that goes along with it, so when something falls through the cracks, they don't come back and say, oh, Joe Blumel was my lawyer, and he's going to take care of it. Okay? So those are some of the critical things that you put in place. Now let's talk about another item that really, and these are kind of ground rules. I mean, all of you can look around in here. We've got a professor, we've got Anitra, we've got the dean in here. And you can look around and you can go, well, okay, the dean, the only reason he's a problem, I mean, if you haven't come to this conclusion, the only reason he's a problem is if I get in trouble, he'd kick me out. Professors are way more important. Anitra is pretty important because I really want a job. Okay? Now, here's another one of the rules that they really don't teach you in law school. And Tim kind of alluded to it, Frank has kind of talked about it, and that is know who's important and what they're important for. And this is the part where you who grew up in the small town, you understand this. Those of you who think Laramie is a small town, here's a lesson for you. And that is, the secretary in the firm that you go to, or a secretary who's willing to talk to you, is not just a secretary, they're God. They know how to do a complaint for a divorce. They know how much the filing fees are. They even know how much it costs when you have to record a deed. They even know that you've got to fill out this form, this statement of consideration that really makes it all work. And if you don't do all those things, then it doesn't matter if you wear your suit or if you have a nice tie and a clean jacket that you get the cat hair off of today to meet with the client. You're going to look like a fool in front of your client. Okay? And that's what Frank's talking about. You don't have a place you can go hide. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this, Wyatt actually, he was on the other side of my first jury trial, and actually that jury trial, he actually, I still think it's Wyatt's fault, but he actually had the district court judge take me and him in chambers, and the district court judge literally threatened to haul me out in the back alley and kick the shit out of me. You remember that, don't you, Wyatt? And of course, when he got done, I asked Wyatt, I said, all right, Wyatt, what did I do? And Wyatt said, I don't know, and went out. Of course, Wyatt really knew what Wyatt had done to get me in such hot water with the judge. But you know, that was a situation where I was a prosecutor. When I was prosecuting cases in Lincoln County and Kemmer, if I wanted to go out and I wanted to have a beer, you know what? I didn't do it in Kemmer. Because the jury that I tried to get on the other side when I was dealing with Wyatt were the people who saw, geez, does Joe go out to the bar? Does he have too many beers when he goes out to dinner? What time does he come to work? What time does he go home? How does he dress? So the thing I did is I had to find someplace else. I would actually go to Wendover, Nevada, until it got too small there, and I'd actually run into people. I was actually prosecuting an aggravated vehicular homicide, and found a good friend of the guy who I was prosecuting. But let me go ahead. I know we're running out of time, and I want to get so that we've got some questions. The thing that I think is important about practicing law in a small town is that you really have 3 important items that you've got to balance. One of them is you have to be a business person. You have to be a business person. You have to do some of the things that Tim's talking about. Frank didn't really talk about it, but he actually put it all together. In this day and age, you can come up and you can set up a business plan. You can get books through the ABA. You can talk to other lawyers. But you know, if you don't set it up right, you can survive for a while, but if you don't set it up right to begin with, it'll come back to haunt you. The things that were really, really critical: trust accounts, trust accounts, trust accounts. Okay? If you don't put that money that Tim talks about with the rich person in town who came in and put down the $2,500, $3,000 retainer, you don't put it in your trust account, and you don't leave it there until you earn it, then you've got a very, very, very high chance that you're not going to be practicing law. Because if you take money of a client's, if you look under the rules of professional conduct, there are actually guidelines that are attached to these. You're going to have to do some research for it. And I'm sure you guys can all do it with all the computers you've got. But there are guidelines that are almost like sentencing guidelines that say, geez, if you steal your client's money, general rule is you're going to get suspended. Maybe not disbarred, but suspended. Now, it's just like a DUI. There went your malpractice premiums. There went your reputation that you're worried about. Because small town papers will love that. You'll make the headlines with that. So you've got to be mindful when you set things up. You've also got to be mindful not only about trust accounts and leaving the money there, doing your bills. You've got to be mindful about conflicts. You've got to really pay attention to conflicts. The other thing that I'm going to tell you that's a big deal in small towns, everybody in this room, I'm sure, has a cell phone of some kind. I just can't believe it. When I fly somewhere, there are people that are walking around the airport talking on their cell phones. I've sat on a plane with people who are sitting there talking on a cell phone about a business deal. And I'm sitting there listening to what they're saying. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wouldn't do it that way. You've got to be kidding me. It's pretty clear they're a lawyer, but it's pretty clear I don't have much respect for them because, number one, they've already lost their attorney-client privilege. Not only to me, but what about all the other people that are sitting around us? So if you're used to driving around or walking around talking on your cell phone and taking care of business, and you think, hey, I can do this practice, I can do it in the cloud, I can live at home, and I can do this great life, maybe you can. I'm going to tell you, be careful what you do and where you do it, because you've got conflicts, you've got privilege issues, and in small towns, people love to look and see what you got on your computer. If you've got a smartphone and you leave it hanging out, people go, oh wow, geez, what have you got there? Those are big deals. And you may not realize it, because of the environment you're in here. But in small towns, people know about it. And if somebody sees that you're careless about that, they're not going to go talk to you. They're going to go out of town, they're going to get Frank, they're going to go to another town and get somebody else. Because, you know, small towns, it's just like in Laramie. If you're going to go shopping, it's better to go down to Denver. You might get something a little better in Denver. Well, you know, if you meet a lawyer, and the lawyers in Laramie don't have a very good reputation, well, I'll just drive over the hill and get somebody in Cheyenne. So those are all things that are big deals in small towns. I'm going to tell you the ABA, I'm involved in the ABA, and the ABA is aware that Big Law has a great culture, it's got a great salary, it's got a great lifestyle, but Big Law is in danger. If you look, how many of you have looked at like LegalZoom on the internet? If you start looking at a lot of the things that are on the internet for free lawyers and stuff like that, or forms and stuff like that, those are the things that are really going after Big Law's profits. I don't believe that small town lawyers are in danger. I think you have some issues, you have some pluses and some minuses if you go Big Law, you go to Denver, you go to Salt Lake. But I think if you go to small town and you do a small town lawyer, the thing that small town practices do is we solve problems that other people can't solve. Now, Tim talks about helping somebody do an LLC. Tim, enjoy it, because that's probably going to lead to additional business. But if it doesn't, and you don't provide those people some additional value, the thing that's going to happen is pretty soon they're going to go, you know, I can just do an LLC online. I can get on the Secretary of State's website, and I can just fill those things out. I don't need to pay Tim $50, $100, $250 to put that stuff together. Who cares about an operating agreement? But here's where it is going to come in. When they break up and they've got a big fight, and they didn't do an operating agreement, then somebody's going to need Tim's expertise, because that's where the problem comes that they can't solve themselves. So I know we need to leave some time for questions. Hopefully, I'll tell you, I love small town practice. I at one time thought I wanted to be a Wall Street lawyer, and I was kind of on track to do that. And then I saw the light, so to speak, and said, I'm coming back to Wyoming. And I sat in this room before they had fancy chairs and fronts on the desk. So I love Wyoming. I'm glad to be back. And, you know, this is a great university. You'll learn the law. You can pick up the business, pay attention to the rules of professional conduct, and think like your mother, your grandmother, your grandfather. What would they think about a lawyer? Because that's the lawyer you want to be if you're in a small town. Thank you.